Hi, I'm Ethan Weiner, and this is my friend David Gale. David and I have known each other for, what, 10, 15 years?
Almost. I'd say almost 15 years now.
Yeah, we used to play in a quartet together, and David went on to greatness while I remained mediocre. And we're going to talk about the violin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, David, how old are you now?
Well, I'm 24. I'll be 25 in December.
Well, how long have you been playing? When did you start?
Well, I started at the age of 9, which by most standards is late, but it came to me very naturally. It's almost like I knew how to read music and play the violin before actually knowing how to do so. So it's been quite an experience to look back and see where I started and how far I've come.
Well, you've certainly come a long way. How much do you practice every day? You must practice for hours, I assume.
Well, now I'd say, that's the age-old question, how much should you practice? A lot of great artists only believe 4 hours a day is the maximum one can put in that's beneficial practice. Anything past that is just mindless, almost nonsense. It's just fiddling away or sitting at the piano, but you're not really thinking about it. But in general, I try to average 5-6 hours and really make that very important part of my day. And then when I'm not doing music, I stay away from everything that has to do with music so that I can concentrate the next day and go back to where I started.
It's a real financial investment to go to these kinds of music schools and get these kinds of teachers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Today it's money being thrown around for teachers. I mean, teachers can charge over $1,000 a lesson today, and who's gonna foot that bill? You can't foot that bill if you're in college and paying for school at the same time. It's impossible. I mean, you want to gain as much knowledge from as many people as possible, regardless of whether you respect them or not. Even in a position that I'm in, studying with Aaron Roseanne, he almost is the end-all of end-all teachers. There's nothing more, as far as violin playing is concerned, that you can really gain from anybody else.
Tell us about your violin.
Well, the instrument that I own, that I play on, is actually a new fiddle. I acquired it in 2009 when it was actually made by a very well-known maker today. His name is Kurt Weidenhouse. He's based out of North Carolina. It's serving me very well so far, especially from the instrument that I had come from. And yes, I have had instruments of very high quality loaned to me, such Stradivarius, Niccolo Amati. And I mean, it's a different style when you actually pick up one of these instruments. I mean, a lot of it is in our heads, the myth of Stradivarius. I mean, does it sound different? Absolutely. It's a very clean sound to a Stradivarius, but at the same time, as the greats have proven, it's not the instrument, but the violinist.
I know you've done a lot of concertos and played with orchestras and done a lot of pieces. How long does it take you to prepare a new major piece?
Usually a major work takes about a week to get it to where I can bring it to a lesson, whether it's Brahms concerto, Tchaikovsky concerto, Paganini, because he doesn't really give you much of a choice. He expects you, if you eat, you practice. If you sleep, you practice. It's very difficult to meet the demand, but eventually you get into that groove of, what the ways of practicing that'll help you learn something and memorize it. Of course, memorization is the most important, because if you don't know it from memory, you really don't know the work. A concept that came around in the 19th century of memorization with Franz Liszt, and that's what he believed. If you didn't memorize a work, you'd never know. You don't know everything there is to know about that piece. Because Chopin would play with the music. Most people didn't realize that, but he would be appalled at the fact that people are memorizing this stuff. Like, you'd rather see the notes, you'd rather see the pianos, the fortes, and everything else that's in the music, but in reality you should know it up in your head, which is very important, very important.
Now, you had mentioned Aaron Rosend.
Yeah.
Now, he is your main teacher now?
He is my main teacher. He's been my guidance for the last 4 years. You know, he comes from the Russian style, along with the Franco-Belgian, but his way of teaching, very Russian, and, you know, you should know the piece, you should have it memorized, so that you should know in the middle of a passage whether it starts up bow or down bow without thinking about it. It should just come natural to you because you should have played the piece that many times before you know, forget about performing it, just bringing it to a lesson. So that style of teaching, I mean, for me, fits very well.
Every concerto has easy parts and hard parts, so if you find a hard part, you'll practice that over and over.
You grind it out as much as possible. It really depends on it. I think, honestly, the best way is to approach it in a very musical manner, that you try to make music out of a very difficult passage. It could be any work. You
know, I've heard it said that an amateur practices until he can get a part once. A professional practices it until he gets it every time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's consistency is the most important. Because throughout a long career, you're going to play the same work many, many times because that's what it calls for. And you want to make sure that piece, when you learned it when you were younger, that it's still there 10 years down the line when you may have to pick it up, and it could be overnight. You never know what happens. Somebody gets sick in a concert. They can't play the concert. You have to fill in. You have to be prepared at all times. That's why learning the work correctly the first time is very important, so that it will come back to you very quickly when you go back to it.
Do you ever think about the underlying chords and the music theory aspect of the pieces you play?
I used to think that was a bunch of garbage at one point, especially as a kid, but after taking music theory, well, I'm not going to say very seriously, but quite seriously throughout my college years, it gave me a better appreciation for the music. And, you know, certain chords make you feel a certain way. So, you know, if you understand the chord progression of the work, it can change your whole concept of the piece.
Right, and even just which note, whether it's the 1, 3, or 5 note of the chord, which one is in the bass, has a huge bearing on the overall quality.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It changes the whole opinion about that specific section of the piece, or the overall continuity of the piece. I think it's very important that you know the chord structures and even just basic theory, because without that, you're pretty much clueless.
The precision, I mean, if you're a millimeter off on a violin, especially on the higher notes, it's out of tune. I mean, The precision needed is just unbelievable.
Playing in tune, there are two basic things, intonation and rhythm. If you don't have those, you're lost. You're lost for good. And my teacher can't stress that enough on his students. Those are the basic principles of violin playing. And it's very important that you know that, because without it, it's impossible.
Well, that's one of the reasons when I was 43 and decided I was going to go back to classical music, I just picked the cello. So, well, you know, it's like twice as long, so I have twice as much room for error for being out of tune. How do you handle tension, or do you not get nervous? You seem like you don't get nervous.
Usually I tend to get pretty angry the week before the concert, and nobody can talk to me without upsetting me in some way. You know, you could look at me wrong and I start to freak out and flip out on you, because eventually the tension has to be released. But usually when it comes time, you know, before the concert, right before, you know, it's calm again. And then, you know, there's no going back. Once you walk out on stage, there's no turning back. You can't say, oh, I'm nervous. I'm going to walk back and then hopefully calm down and come back out. Whatever is in the practice room, that hopefully whatever you did there will come out on stage. Of course, you're going to be spontaneous on stage. You're going to, all of a sudden, something could be going very well and you want to make it, you know, a little bit more schmaltzy, and you decide to make a slide you didn't do. And hopefully it works out for the best. People come to a concert to enjoy. They don't come to criticize you. Anybody that does obviously has nothing better to do in their life.
I remember, and I don't remember who the artist was, but I remember reading, I think it was probably an interview in Strings magazine, it was somebody pretty well known, who said, you know, about getting nervous. He said, you know, the audience is on your side. They want you to do well. They're not, you know, they're supporting you. You know?
Yeah, of course.